Ladies and gentlemen, big hairy news.
Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hero News. Kia ora, Chewy. How are you, sir?
I'm for someone that is just barely starting his week. I'm a very tired sausage.
Already?
There seems to be an excess of hours in the day that I'm filling with being awake. I plan to remedy that at some stage in the future.
Like in about a month? 16 shows to go, Chewy, for us until we knock off for the year.
Oh,
Not that
wow.
I'm counting.
That's one. I was thinking that you're going to bring up the fact that it's 1 month till Christmas.
I know, 25th today. Shocking.
As the BHN representative for all retail workers everywhere, I was going to have to come round to your house and beat your ass. So I'm glad that we haven't done that.
I've moved. You don't know where I live anymore. I used to live there. Now I've gone. Yeah. It's a funny time of year. In fact, I was thinking today, Chewy, when you live in a bigger centre, like I experienced this living in Auckland for a long time, it doesn't feel like the slowdown for the end of the year happens until like the week before Christmas. And there is a kind of a peace that comes over the city like on Christmas Eve. But I tell you what, in Dunedin, when the students leave, the city goes, and I love the students. I like having them here. It does it the opposite at the end of January into February. You feel this energy come into the city. But we seem to, the vibe we get is it feels like it's that Christmas wind down that starts about now. Like there's parks in the city. You can get a park anywhere you're going. There's not a car in every single space. And it's just a bit of a different vibe. It's like from 4 weeks out from Christmas, you're starting to go, where I remember living in Auckland, it was like, rush, Christmas. And then maybe even after Christmas is the, but here it's before. It's quite nice. I quite like it. Yeah, but not for you. Busy for the shopping, eh?
Look, with what I do, I'm lucky it's not terribly seasonal. It's just, we just keep doing what we're doing. But I do think of my time in video game shop and mass market retail, and I'm like, I'm thinking of you, brothers and sisters.
Praying for you.
I'm thinking of you. I will not return.
I have in my hot little hand, you can't see it because it would be weird if I turned around and showed you the name. These are courier tickets. Because on Friday and on today, I split the list of T-shirts and hoodies that were going to go out, the Nikki No Boats. And basically, if you purchased one, I think Wednesday or before, if you purchased one Thursday, Friday, or in the weekend, it's still to come out. But pretty much many of you will have got a notification in your email. If you didn't have an email on your thing, you'll have to wait and see. And let me just say, if I can get less than a 1% error rate, that'd be good. Like I had one of these ones, this one right here, which I won't show you. There's a name on this because when you go to New Zealand Post, they write the name on the ticket so you can then go home and you know which one's been sent. They've put a name on here that doesn't exist for any person that bought anything. So by the process of elimination, this was the last one. There was only one left and there was this one and it wasn't listed anywhere. So I don't know. I think I've got it all right, but there's failure points all over the place. There's a failure point at New Zealand Post when they're trying to write the names down. There's a failure point when I put them in manually. So we hope it's good. But if anything happens, just come back to me super quick and I'll sort it out for you. But speaking of merch, Sherwood, do you want to just raise up a little bit? Just so give us a bit of a twirl. Hey, I'm going to put you in full screen.
Raise up like a praise thing. Or...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, bit higher.
Oh, who's that?
A little bit higher.
Who's
a little
that?
bit higher.
Oh, look.
I mean, come on, people.
I'm wearing a T-shirt of myself. This is the level of cringe that I have never obtained before. This is great. It's not as cringy if it's you, chat. It's cringy if I wear it.
That is one of the dopest T-shirts I've ever seen in my life.
I like it. I assume your method of buying the t-shirt before the printing was like, oh, we'll go for a nice tasteful orange, louder,
Yeah. Turn it up,
louder.
turn it up, turn it up, turn it up.
Yeah.
So
Maximum
people,
orange.
we have a 5-day special when it comes to the merch shop. And this is a drop like we used to do drops. You order, we send out. So anything you order this week, you expect to get at the latest December 14th. But the reason we're only doing 5 days is because I want you to get the stuff before Christmas. Look at that t-shirt, Chewy. Look at that foo-foo t-shirt. It's the Chewy foo-foo. And we're doing it in orange, and we're doing it in this color, which is called sage. So if your inner chewiness is more of a peaceful kind of person, but your outer chewiness is like, then maybe sage would be your option. In the hoodies, we're doing it in black, and we're doing it in orange, and someone's bought an orange, and I'm just like,
An orange hoodie.
You are the winner.
Oh.
You are the winner of life if you're the person who bought that orange hoodie today. We've got Nikki No Boats, the ones that we had last week. They're up there. How about this, eh? We've got the new little BHN logo that Emily did. There we go. We got that in rust. We got that. This is called Black Marl. This is called Black Marl. So it's not a black. It's Black Marl. It's kind of like, the way I think about it, it's almost like a stonewashed black. It's not quite as dark black as black. And the reason I did that is because we have some buffers this month, appropriately with the Tino Rangatiratanga flag going through them. We've got a pink, we've got a green, we've got a maroon, and we've got a black marl. And the reason we've got black marl is because so much of this is black. I didn't want to put black on black. You know, I wanted it to have a little bit of standing out. So that's why we're doing black marl rather than just straight black. If you don't know what we're doing, what we're about when it comes to buffers, green, oh, there they are. Then on the buffer listing is the story with Margaret Mutu. Professor Margaret Mutu gave us that word. This comes from her. This is the story she told when Chewy asked her a question that I've been jealous of for the last 12 months, which I keep talking about wanting to own some of myself.
Good question.
So if you don't know, I'm not going to go through it now. If you don't understand what buffer is, go have a look and check it out. And then, of course, there's a couple of leftover Beardy Boy ones as well. So 4 T-shirts and hoodies available, 4 styles. The Foo-Foo Chewy, the Nikki No Boats, the BHN cartoon, and the buffer. Now, if you ordered Nikki No Boats last week, or if you had to wait because the sizings weren't, we've got all the sizes now. 4XL, 5XL, they're in there. There are some sizes that aren't available, and that's purely because of the manufacturer. So I think, for example, Sage is not available in small or medium, and that's purely because they're not in cloak at the moment. They don't stock them at the moment. They're out. So there's a couple that aren't available. For everything else, there's whatever you want. Now, when I say 5 days only, I will be pulling these down off the shop after Friday night's show, because I have to get the merch back. I have to then do all the printing. I have to then get them out to you and want to do it before Christmas. So do not sit back. Get into there, get what you need, order one for your friend. Every National Party member in New Zealand should own a Nikki No Boats. We accept that by now. Yes. If you are a buffer, and very quickly, a buffer is someone who is not part of a group but works as an ally to that group. So, for example, we have done buffer shirts for the LGBT community this week because Chewy and I aren't a part of that. We've done buffers for the Cancer Society because, you know, we weren't a part of that right now, but lots of people are. And obviously this time is we're actually going back to our roots of Margaret Mutu and doing buffer because we're not Māori, but we want to stand in the middle and stand in the gap, as we were invited to by Professor Margaret Mutu. Don't get this twisted. There are some people out there using things like white savior complex. Oh, look at the white saviors. Professor Margaret Mutu invited us into this. And I'm happy to take her invitation over many other people who want to say shitty things on message boards. Message boards, how old am I on the social medias? So bhnshop.nz.
I always come back to what a good friend of mine says when I mention Pākehā participation in this sort of stuff. And she says it's so important for Māori to have a designated Pākehā involved in the movement with them. So I am that designated Pākehā. I'm absolutely fine with that.
Now, one other thing, people in the chat have been talking about stickers. I have received the sticker equipment. My intention, and I'll say it is an intention right now because I haven't tried to do it yet, my intention is to match every bit of merch bought this week with a matching sticker. So if you buy a Tino Rangatiratanga, to put a Tino Rangatiratanga sticker in as well. When you buy not the Beardy Boy, this is just the BHN stuff. If you buy Nicky No Boats sticker in there. Now, I'll come back to you tomorrow after I've had a chance to try it all out, but that's my intention. A little freebie on the side, a little Merry Christmas for us. Right, now that was too long, Joey. I do apologise. Tonight we are going to very shortly go and have a look at David Seymour on Q&A. Let me show you something, Chewy. See that list there? That list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different things I could have pulled out of that interview for us to talk about. That would take literally all night. So we're going to do 4. We're going to do 4 of those, and then we're going to do Debbie's response to it on Q&A, and then we're going to have, I wasn't aware that Debbie was going to do this, but Debbie really hit hard the Atlas Network. It came out very quickly and it came back repetitively in her conversation. So I thought, gosh, maybe we should bring into a part of the conversation what Debbie was talking about, which is the Atlas Network. Now, Dr. Jeremy Walker is a friend of the show. He's been on before. He's going to come back with us after we've looked at those two and talk about, you know, is this the Atlas Network? How do they get involved? Is this the kind of thing they do? Are they involved here? Does David Seymour and ACT have a connection? Do we know what it is? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be at the end. And just so you know what we're talking about, here is a tweet that Jeremy stuck out recently. The haka that shook the Atlas. Te Pāti Māori MP Debbie Ngarewa-Packer warns David Seymour is, quote, led by the Atlas narrative, end quote. The Treaty of Waitangi is, quote, the last legal bastion we have to protect all of Aotearoa from corporate exploitation, end quote. Pat and Chewy and I discussed tonight, 7 p.m. Sydney time, because, you know, we get the big international guests, Chewy. That's what we do. It's you and me, we get the big international guests. Okay, so big show, guys, and we're not going to fart around too much because there's quite a bit of video to get through, and it is incredibly important and worthwhile. Chewy, before we get into that, I want to add one little thing to it. Completely off target, off topic, no worries. I found the solution for the gang patch law.
Oh,
Did
okay.
I see it?
Are we nationalizing the gangs?
Yeah. It's merch.
Oh no.
No?
Oh yes.
It's cool, eh?
Wow. That is
So
that is certainly something.
can you imagine that being on some kind of Barbie type person and having the police throw them to the ground and put them in? Anyway, I just saw that today and thought it was not mockingly hilarious, but yeah, kind of interesting. Okay. Anything before we kick off the show, Chewy? I'm going to go straight to David Seymour after if you've got anything to share.
Really quick. There's just a couple of days left to vote for us in the podcast awards. There are links will be in the chat throughout the evening. I want people with this sort of wrap up for YouTube to bring their energy to the voting process. This was posted in our Discord.
Oh, really?
Almost 2,500 minutes listening to our podcast. And as that person put it, I could have learned a language in that time. You could have, but you didn't. So no backsies.
2,500, 52 weeks. Isn't that only 50 a week? We do 6 hours of broadcasting a week.
You're calling that some rookie numbers? Are you saying they're not watching every show?
I mean, like, we can get someone else with higher numbers than that, surely. But we appreciate
who's got higher numbers? Put it up in the chat if you've got higher numbers. I want to see.
Erica Earlett says, can we vote more than once? I don't know. Maybe it's worth a crack. Who knows? All right. Yeah, thank you for that. That gets it cut off, I think, is the 27th, and then they announce them on the 28th. So we never get close to winning anything in the real categories, but you guys can vote for us, and we got silver last year from people voting for us. And everyone who watches this video, if you want to vote for it, that might just be enough to get us over the line to get it. So it's also in the description of this if you're watching on YouTube. Okay, team, let's get into this, shall we? Let us get into this. I'm not sure I've met this guy before. Do you know who this is? I haven't seen him around. He's a new face, a new young face in politics.
He looks real familiar to me.
There's someone in Canada who looks a bit like this. Is he Canadian?
Are you talking about this stunning hunky man?
Oh, you are a sex god.
Look at that. Does he look like Beavis?
Yeah, a
that
little bit,
hair.
eh?
A little bit. Libertarian.
All right, let's go. Not can't have too many of the funnies tonight, Chewy, because we've got a lot of video to get through. David Seymour. David Seymour is forever talking about dividing by ethnicity, how it's never worked anywhere in the world. One of the things we often say about that is we go, affirmative action? Could we say affirmative action kind of worked? That's so, maybe there's some, but he says it as a fact, right? And no one ever pushes back until old mate Jack Tame.
That's the division it's led us to.
So you've said, I think, that dividing people by race and ethnicity and granting them different sets of rights or legal rights has never worked anywhere.
Yep.
What about Sweden?
Silence.
What about Sweden?
Well, the Sami reindeer people have indigenous rights to herd reindeer. They have land rights, a Sami parliament. All of that's enshrined in law. Sweden's not yet a failed state.
Well, that may well be true.
Yeah, this is really important to cut in straight away. He says is a failed state. He doesn't say has some issues in the state to work about. Now, a failed state is not a country that's got, 3% discussion difference. A failed state is like a crashing economy, cannot function. Very careful to watch the trick here. He says it's a failed state. Then when he gets pushed back on, he goes, well, I don't think it's good for everybody. So he's saying different things, and it's really good that Jack called him out on it.
Parliament, all of that's enshrined in law. Sweden's not yet a failed state.
Well, that may well be true, but I think...
What about Canada?
Silence.
Well, again...
And the US, they have indigenous people have rights enshrined in law. Same with Aboriginal Australians. These aren't failed states.
Well, if you want to talk about Australia, Canada and the United States...
No, I mean, that
Sweden.
phrase you've used a few times now, that dividing people by race and ethnicity, granting them different sets of legal rights, has never worked anywhere. I mean, there are 4 countries where it's worked.
Well, actually, I don't believe it has worked. If you want to talk about any of those countries, let's take Canada, for example, one that I happen to know a little bit about the background.
I never knew he'd been to Canada. Did you know he'd been to Canada, Joey? I was never aware of that.
Don't make me get that picture back up again.
Let's take Canada, for example, one that I happen to know a little bit about the background. The reason that people believe New Zealand has the best race relations in the world is because we've never done or never dreamed of doing what Canada's done, which has effectively put 1 million people of First Nations ancestry under INAC, or Indian and Northern Affairs Canada, and say you live on a reserve.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is working. That's the interview then.
Yeah.
Put it back in the bag. We're the envy of the world for race relations because of what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I think I tweeted something very similar today, Chewy, and I used that thing about failed state. It's like, but New Zealand's not. So, hang on. The way we're doing it now, we haven't fallen over. We haven't, so it's working here. But you say it doesn't. Yeah. Anyway, we'll keep going. Give them some grace.
Under INAC, or Indian and Northern Affairs Canada, and say you live on a reserve, it's governed by a band council, all of your social services are funded through one government department, and the level of poverty, dysfunction, abuse that occurs on those reserves is absolutely third world. So, the idea...
Third world. This doesn't work third world. He's using an example, but we also spoke about Sweden, third world, or world leading. New Zealand, third world?
See, the thing is, what Jack has said here is not that all of those countries that were listed are doing a fantastic job, and that this is the pathway of how to treat your indigenous people. North America clearly has problems. Canada is an absolute shit show for how they treat their indigenous people, and they're only starting now to address that. The Sami people had to fight for everything that they've got in Finland and Sweden. So Jack isn't saying here's a list of countries that do it better.
No.
The argument that David Seymour is saying is that it's never worked anywhere ever.
And it causes the state to fail. It causes the state to fail, which clearly it's not.
None of that is true. And then in the same conversation, he says we're the envy of the world for our race relations. And it just made me have a brain hemorrhage where I go, yes, because we've got the treaty, Te Tiriti, and we've got the Waitangi Tribunal, and we've had 50 years of learned discussion about what this document means to us. That's why we're the envy of the world. No one has these things.
Yep. All right, let's keep going.
That somehow an American or Australian or Canadian view. Yeah, but my thing is it doesn't work. The reason that people admire
whilst giving examples of it working.
New Zealand is that compared to any of those other 3 Anglo countries, we have taken the view that all New Zealanders have equal rights. That's actually what our treaty says. In the last 50 years, we've started to go down a track that, in my view, makes us much more like Australia, Canada and the United States, where people who are of First Nations or Indigenous or Aboriginal heritage are told, no, you're in a separate basket from other citizens.
They're hardly failed states, though, are they? So why should Parliament...
Just a second, though. The question is for the people who are affected by those policies.
Well, I think many Māori would argue that actually Māori haven't benefited from the status quo in New Zealand right now. Māori are overrepresented in all the bad things, underrepresented in all the good stats in New Zealand.
Yeah, but
very quickly,
though. No, you're missing the point here. The point is there are 2 basic ways to do this. One is to have division, a different set of rights, different sovereignty.
The division that this bill is causing. He says division like if people do separate things in separate areas. If people over 65 can get a pension and people under 65 can't. You know, if the Catholic Church can only hire male priests, no females, discrimination based on sex, that kind of division's okay. He's not challenging that kind of division. So you always got to bring it back to why is he so focused on these race issues when he's happy to see discrimination in other areas of life as well.
He will always mention New Zealand as being divided, like this is the most divided that we've ever been. And then he introduced this bill, and that was shown to be a lie as well.
Yeah.
So if his concern is how divided this country is, why are you dividing it more?
Yeah, and or like you've just said very cleverly, Chewy, when you've looked for an expression of division, say the hikoi, what you saw was unity. I mean, it's even because if it was division, you would have seen a counter protest. Was there one? No. Couple of odd individuals here and there. So that would be division. Like you think about, they always talk about 81 Springbok Tour. There was a protest and there was a counter protest. There was division. They're saying there's division, but we're not seeing division. We might be hearing division if we listen to fucking talkback radio or read the, as you always say, Chewy, what is it, the New Zealand Herald comments section. But when you get the chance to put the rubber where the road is, literally on the road walking, there seems to be complete unity in the way that this country despises in general what they're doing. We'll just get to the end of this. It's got like 30 seconds.
Live under a different jurisdiction in a different location. That is the Australian, Canadian and American model. It's been a disaster. Are there problems in New Zealand? Yes. But our model of saying we have...
Sorry. He keeps saying these big words. It's been a disaster. It hasn't worked, but he's giving no examples. Remember, is America a failed state? Well, actually, Trump, maybe that's the one, we'll give him that one, but not for the reasons he thinks. Sweden, failed state, no. You know, and he goes, but that's the problem, that's the division. And then he just moves on. Now, Jack does very well through this, but it's a typical gish gallop. Everyone knows what a gish gallop is, where you give out as many facts and words and stuff as possible that the person interviewing you can only come back to one. So the other 8 things you say they have to leave alone, or it would be a 19-hour video. So he's very good at saying big word, big word, big word, big word, big word, big concept, scary word, scary word, scary word, and Jack gets to come back at one of them. And so those other 19 things get left there for people to understand it. And all the writers go, oh gosh, didn't he take him apart? He didn't answer any of those other things, he said. Yeah, because we don't have a spare 3 days. It's not, was it Nixon who did like a 48-hour interview? Something like that? We don't have the time for that. Sorry, Joe. I'm going to shut up. We'll get to the end of this.
One standard of citizenship. We're all human rights. You all have equal rights. That is vastly superior to what they've done. My argument is the last 50 years we've become more like, not very far, but we've started to go in that direction of division. So and I think we need to go back to New Zealand's true approach, which is equal rights for all.
So why should...
There you go. So that's clip number 1. Chewy, I'll give you the last word on that, sir.
No, I'm not going to say anything because we've got a lot to get through, as you said.
Look at you. Holy moly, who is this? Yep. This orange man, orange shirt. Oh, Orange man. We should see one of those Trump. He'd look good in that orange. Okay. I love this bit. And I know my tongue's in my cheek when I say this, but I think Jack Tame may have been listening to us, Chewy, because he has a fantastic conversation here, which is what we've been talking about this for 18 months, that you could look and can look at the treaty as a contract. This is a libertarian. Do you believe in the sanctity of contracts? That's what he's saying. And this is great. And there is no comeback or no answer for it.
Do you believe in the sanctity of contracts?
Yes, I do, but I also believe that contracts need to be interpreted, especially over 184 years. And you've got to balance that against the rights of people.
Shoom. See that? He went from do you believe in the sanctity of contracts to talking about the treaty. No, I don't have to have my contract with my bank interpreted because I know what it says. It's there. And if I don't know, I could probably go to my accountant who would be an expert who could tell me, right? But contracts don't have to be interpreted. You want to interpret this contract. That's what it is.
To be a thinking and valuing being with equal dignity and equal respect afforded to them in our constitutional arrangements.
But you would agree, if not a partnership between races, you would agree, I think, that the treaty is a binding agreement between iwi hapu and the Crown, right? So how would it be just for one party to an agreement to unilaterally define the meaning of that agreement without the other party's consent?
Well, that's exactly what's been happening over the past 50 years when the courts and the Waitangi...
Nope.
It's just lie after lie after lie.
The courts, the Crown and Māori have all been participants in this conversation. It hasn't been Māori going, we'll just do what we want and ignore the Crown. Nope. It hasn't been happening for 50 years, you fucking liar.
Well, that's exactly what's been happening over the past 50 years when the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal have a very narrow range of...
Respectfully, the courts aren't the Crown, though, are they?
Well, that may be true.
So the courts aren't actually one of those parties that signed the agreement. The Crown signed the agreement with iwi and hapu. Those are the two separate parties to the agreement.
This is a beautiful point, Chewy. You've signed a mortgage and your bank has signed a mortgage. If there is conflict there, you go to an arbitrator who is an independent body. You've signed a contract with your workplace. The workplace has signed it. You have signed it. If there's disagreement with that, you go to a third party, which is an arbitrator. You don't allow your workplace to dictate what it says. This is beautiful. David Seymour is saying one of the signatories of this contract is now going to dictate what it says. That's not how you resolve a contract. It's not how you resolve a contract. You get a third party to arbitrate between you. And the third party in New Zealand is, and always has been, the fucking courts. It's a really good point, and it's a bit of a spin on this today that I think we should all remember.
So the courts are the closest thing we actually have to a neutral arbiter. I mean, it is the responsibility of the courts to resolve conflicts or divisions between the Crown and other parties, which is exactly what they've been doing.
Nonetheless, what they've come up with is a version of the treaty that is completely unworkable with a...
Nonetheless means that might be true, but that's what nonetheless means. And then what he's saying is, nonetheless, that is unhelpful to my narrative. That's what he's just said. In a liberal democratic state. I mean, we've just seen that. The best examples you can come up with are American, Canadian, and Australian
Sweden,
reserves. Yeah.
So,
I mean, the examples you came up with are so
back
disastrous.
to that point, though. No. So I mean, I think this is a critical part of this, right? Why should the Parliament, which is the Crown, in your case you are a minister of the Crown, why should a party that has a direct conflict of interest when it comes to the Treaty of Waitangi be the one to ultimately interpret what the treaty means without the consent of the other party?
Well, it's actually the Parliament on behalf of the people of New Zealand. And the problem with...
You're a minister of the Crown, though, right? So you are a concerned party, as opposed to the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal, which are... neutral third party.
If you want to get into this three branches of government thing, sure, I'm the executive, and as a minister I introduce the bill to Parliament. It's the Parliament, which is the elected legislature of New Zealand, that is deciding whether or not it goes forward. Now,
you as a minister of the Crown define these principles. The Crown is a concerned party when it comes to the Treaty of Waitangi, which is why, in the eyes of some...
Go, Chewy.
He fundamentally doesn't understand this, clearly. He doesn't see that there's a conflict of interest. He goes up to this point and just misses it every time.
Yeah, but respectfully, or he absolutely does, and he's aware of the laziness of media and of people to do the work. I mean, I don't believe that Trump is ignorant to all those things that he says are wrong. I believe there's an element of it that he can say it loudly and confidently, and he knows people will believe it. So you might be right, but I think the equal and opposite, that he knows exactly what he's freaking doing, might be right as well.
Yeah.
Fair?
The other aspect of this is he's talking about, you know, I'm just a simple representative of the people of New Zealand, as we all are in Parliament. Cool. This isn't representative of a large portion of the country. They didn't ask for this. You could go, all right, everybody that voted for ACT wanted this. It's 8%. Like, it is not representative. It is not a representative piece of legislation. And unfortunately, Jack falls for this trap later on as well, of regurgitating the Curia poll that said more people in New Zealand were in support of this legislation than against it. Now, there are huge problems with Curia polls' accuracy and integrity, and it kind of shocked me that he regurgitated that particular poll. So, you know, everything that David says as a surety. Like, most of the country is for this. It's not backed up.
Yeah.
It's not backed up. And even if it was true, which it is not, or at the very least is debatable, it is also Parliament's role to go, this is a bad piece of law. This is bad for the integrity of this country. Like, if everybody just answered a poll that said, free guns for everyone, you know,
no more tax.
Parliament
no more tax.
Go, oh, well, no more tax. Tax, no tax, and yes, guns. You know, Parliament would be quite within their rights, I think, to go, well, I don't know about that.
Well, I think, Chewy, and we'll keep going in a sec, but I think that what you've said several times, giving you credit for it, is you do not decide issues of, what do we say, race?
Race relations.
Race relations by referendum. That's what it is. Because sometimes the correct thing to do, so this is why the numbers don't really matter. Sometimes the correct thing to do is the less popular thing to do. Sometimes the correct thing to do is what you've committed to, and now it's become unpopular with some, you still have to do it. Sometimes the best thing to do is when your representatives previously to you have signed a fucking contract that say you're going to do it. You know? So let's keep going, yeah?
Having courts be the arbiter of this might be more appropriate. I mean, if you think about other contracts, right? If it was like, you know, I appreciate it's different, but a car loan or a mortgage or a custody agreement.
I think Jack's been watching. Oh, look at that. Pause down on me.
I appreciate it's different, but a car loan or a mortgage or a custody agreement, it would be totally unjust for one party to unilaterally decide what that agreement means?
Well, first of all, often those contracts are actually made in the context of the laws of the country at the time. But the second point I make...
Not what Jack said, by the way. Jack just said if you're getting a car loan, it's not okay for the person giving the loan to then change the... That's what he said, and Seymour hasn't answered it and won't answer it.
Much more important that actually these treaty principles only exist because Parliament said they exist. It's the treaty principle.
Like any law in this country that we've ever had. Are we now saying we can change everything because they're not really such a big deal? You know, only Parliament set the speed limit, shall we? We'll just change it. I mean, we should fight it and then change it because that means nothing. It's like such a stupid, unintelligent argument.
That we're talking about defining. So
they exist. They exist because the courts said they exist, and then Parliament chose to interpret the court's decision and put that into legislation.
And subsequent to that...
So the courts, which were the independent, neutral third party in this, or as close as we can get to a neutral third party, they were the ones who ultimately defined those treaty principles. The Parliament then decided to take that decision from the courts and put it into legislation.
And subsequent to that, the Parliament put them into legislation and across a whole lot of other statutes, which has affected the life and the rights that people have in this country every day. So you can make the argument all day about contracts and whether the courts are the right arbiter. But what I come back to is the question of whether or not it delivers a constitutional setting that gives equal rights, respect and dignity to each human being in this country. And what they've done clearly hasn't. And when the best example you can come up with of it working anywhere else in the world is, you know, Canadian reserves.
I mean, that's your interpretation of the treaty, and we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, no, that's the end of that clip. Shall we go for it?
Yeah. That's not what Jack said. Like you heard him say that. The only example you can bring that up is the Canadian reservations. Absolutely misrepresented what Jack said there.
By many of those
Sorry.
You know, right from the start, Jack was using that as a pushback against the repeated line that David has used in every interview, every single interview about this bill. He has parroted the line that no country that has made division based on ethnicity or ancestry, it's never worked anywhere.
Yeah. And he says it, he goes, show me where it's worked. He goes, show me where it's worked. Well, Jack's just showing you. Every time we talk about it, the one thing we often say is, sorry, the name just jumped out of my head. Race relations in America, affirmative action seems to have worked. You're following that. So, but Chewy, this is the thing. He says it quickly. He says it confidently. He says 20 other things beside it, and he says enough to slip through and then give his minions on social media the ability to think they can push back, and then the people they're pushing back against don't have the details to push back. So it's just like a layer of shit that sits on top of us all the time, and you can't quite press through, or enough people can't quite get through it, that it's just always there. And because there's enough of it, there's enough words, there's enough ideas, there's enough opinions, they can never actually break through the counterspin to it, sorry for the pun, to actually show the truth. There's that old adage about how lies will go around the world before truth gets its pants on. This is basically
and
it.
Look, I think what David's doing is working. It is creating a bit of confusion. Like, yes, he's talking to his faithful that will just parrot these lines. Like I have literally been arguing on YouTube with someone for a week where they're going, point out in David's bill where it's racist with quotation marks, which no, and it's like it's not. There's nothing in the words that is objectively racist, but its intention is. The effect on it will be racist, and these sort of things. But then the other thing that I've seen, and I love this, I saw a great example of it in the New Zealand subreddit today, where someone said, "I'm very confused on this. Can someone please explain to me? I don't get it. All of this stuff sounds great. Equality sounds like something that we should strive for, right? So why are people angry?" And what I saw in that thread was a whole bunch of people take this person at face value and take time and spell out exactly what's going on. And this is what we talk about, is it's really easy to hit that. This is racist and I'm angry and I don't have to explain it why. We're not going to bring people with us if we do that. As frustrating as it is, you spend all of the time, you're either talking to people that agree with you or you're yelling at people that aren't. You need to think about the people that are stuck in the middle. We need to bring them with us with facts, with reason. And David doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
David wants to muddy the waters because that's where he gets his pull from.
Let's go on to the third of four clips, and they're talking about Article 2, and it's a very, very, again, Jack does very well here, trying to get David. I actually felt that David was really weak. Like, I mean, David is a pretty good debater, even if it is high school debate. But Jack here is going to challenge him on, what do you think? And he keeps coming back to what it should be. And he goes, no, not should. What do you think? He comes across as very weak in this argument. Like it's never been pushed back on him before. And he's just having to think of these things now. So they talk about Article 2 here.
The point of your opponents, though, is that nowhere in the treaty does it actually guarantee everyone that level of tino rangatiratanga, that it specifically includes a carve-out for iwi and hapu.
Well, it said it would give tiro rangatiratanga
or the signatories to the treaty.
All the people of Nutarani, all the people in New Zealand. Now, of course, most people say, oh, well, clearly that meant just the chiefs that were there in 1840.
Right. So
I think
it means all people.
I think it should mean all the people of New Zealand.
You think it should mean? You think it should mean? But do you think that's what it meant?
Well, the courts like to tell you.
No. What do you think?
Well, I
think it should mean.
But it should mean all the people.
My question is, what do you think it actually meant?
Well, I think it should mean all the people.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm not asking what you think it should mean. I'm asking what you think it meant.
Well, I suspect, I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. The courts have told us that it meant only Māori. The courts have told us that we now live in a country.
Remember from earlier, the courts, that arbitrator who's more neutral than either Māori or the Crown, those people, the ones who are in the middle?
is divided by ancestry into two collectives.
Okay, so
and that doesn't work. So here's what it should
so
be.
The line you quoted Te Tiriti there. So ko te kuini o ngā arane ka whakarite ka whakaai ki ngā rangatira ki ngā hapu ki ngā tangata katoa o New Tirane, New Zealand, right? Ngā tangata katoa, and you've interpreted that as meaning all New Zealand.
All the people of New Zealand, yes.
So, but I mean, you're giving us an English translation of a Māori text there, but of course we don't need the English translation of...
Sorry. This is very good.
Can I just make a quick point here?
Yeah.
Just of something that was quite common at the time. The people of New Zealand, when the colonizers were referring to them, were Māori.
Yeah.
Everybody else was English or British. They didn't identify themselves with the country that they were in. They identified them by the empire they were part of and the country that they came from. So references in historical documents about New Zealanders, they're referring to Māori.
Yeah.
David, because he is not a history guy, does not know this.
Well, or he does. Again, sorry to be a clanging cymbal. Or he does, and he's trying to twist it and hope enough people believe him. But this is very good, this part.
Giving us an English translation of a Māori text there, but of course we don't need the English translation of the Māori.
So you got that? So basically, English version first, Māori version written from the English version, and now David Seymour is giving you an English interpretation of the Māori version. But what we're about to hear is you don't need to interpret what the Māori version was, because the Māori version was written from the English one. So let's go see what the original English one said.
Text, because the Māori text was based on the original English text, right? So what does the English text of Article 2 of the treaty say?
Well, you've got it in front of you. Why don't you read it?
Well, I mean, so this comes to the heart of your argument,
that's
right?
not good.
So really we're looking to see whether or not the English text guaranteed all people in New Zealand, tino rangatiratanga, or just iwi and
you're going to
hapu.
read out that it says that they're going to protect the chieftainship of their lands.
I'll read it out, just because, I mean, you've given us an interpretation of the Māori text, but here's the English text upon which the Māori text was written. Her Majesty the Queen of England confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and tribes of New Zealand and to the respective families and individuals thereof the full, exclusive and undisturbed possessions of their lands, estates, forests, fisheries and other properties which they may collectively or individually possess, so long as it is their wish. That's tino rangatiratanga for Māori, a specific carve-out for Māori, not for...
And guess what? Old Seymour's only comeback is, yeah, but aren't we supposed to use the Māori version? Not the English version. We're supposed to use the Māori version, whereas Jack's just showing him, I know. So in other words, you've now got David Seymour fighting to use the Māori version, which means two things. First is, okay, so let's get some Māori language experts to tell us, oh, you don't have any? Oh, okay. Well, then let's find out how that was written from the English version. So it's a very, very nice bit. So now he'll explain it again, and then we'll move on.
That's tino rangatiratanga for Māori, a specific carve-out for Māori, not for all New Zealanders.
No, I understand that's what it says, but equally everyone tells you you've got to use the Maori text because that's what the signatories understood.
Interpreting the Maori...
That's a bit woke, don't you think, Chewy? Well, Seymour's a bit woke. Using the Maori version. What? It's a bit woke.
Maori text, when the Maori text is based on the English text, shows that clearly it's a carve-out for Māori, not for everyone. That's what the treaty says.
It's a very cute argument, Jack, but just remember...
it's actually an argument based on the treaty, right? And whether or not your principles actually reflect what's in the treaty. And you say that the principles are for all New Zealanders, and clearly the treaty says this is for Māori.
No, your cute argument is that we must listen to the Maori text because it's the Maori text that it was signed, it's the Maori text that was that the British were the proposers of it, therefore it should be the Maori interpretation that is used, and then as soon as convenient you say, oh no, actually no, we'll go back to the English text.
And your cute argument is that the legal scholars have interpreted the Maori text as meaning one thing are wrong, even though the Maori text was based on an English text which very clearly shows that the carve-out was for Maori, not for all New Zealanders. Now,
boom. I mean like boom. I mean like boom, 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 boom. Go, Joe.
Again, just to really underline something, because Jack says there, not all New Zealanders. Again, when you're referring to documents from this time period, New Zealanders are exclusively Māori. So that's a really easy interpretation when it comes to this. That's who they were talking about.
Yeah. Natives. People who live in this country.
Yeah. And this is the thing. Like, David isn't a law guy. He's not a history guy. He thinks that this is a plus, and he thinks that that is why everybody should have their say on a historical document that many will not have a grounding to understand. Like, just opening it up to everybody. Yes, sure. Pure democracy. Call it that. Is it effective lawmaking? No, it's not. And we just really need to draw a point that David, earlier in this interview, where he is bricking it the entire time, comes down to the fact that he said we are the envy of the world for our race relations. Straight out of the gate, first couple of minutes, he destroys his own argument. It is spectacular.
Heidi might come back to me, because this last bit is just kind of a bit of fun. It's just 60 seconds. And don't we love it when we see David Seymour get pissy? Let's have a look, eh?
Is this worth doing if treaty settlements have to be renegotiated?
Well, I don't believe that they will be. All law exists in the context, all contracts exist in the context of the wider laws of New Zealand.
But that is the advice from the officials, though.
What's interesting about so much of this interview is how easily people question the idea that a parliament elected by the majority of New Zealanders shouldn't be able to make law.
Who have a vested interest in the document being changed. Remember, with one of the signatories. It's like your boss doing it. The boss is doing it.
Laws that are consistent with
the argument I made was that you, as a Minister of the Crown, arguably should not be defining the treaty principles, given the Crown is one of the concerned parties in the treaty, and that actually the courts are a much more appropriate place to define those treaty principles, because they are a neutral third-party arbiter. We're running out of time.
Except I'm not. Parliament is the democratically elected body of New Zealand, making the laws people need to live under.
And the executive is the representation of the Crown, as opposed to the courts.
Yeah, but
right.
It's the
conflict
Parliament that would pass the treaty principles.
Do you reckon?
There you go. That's it. Little bit pissy. This is a new thing for David Seymour since leading up to the last election. And we've played it several times. And I know we played it several times because I can remember writing on some highlights every now and again. David Seymour getting pissy. They always get good views. So that's a good thing. So yeah. Chewy, we're going to move on to Debbie shortly, and we've got to do some super chats now. But you've got a chance. You want to respond to any of that?
Yeah, look, I just want to say, I watched this whole interview before we jumped on tonight. And sure, I was very close to having to go and buy a new TV. But the whole interview is well worth watching. A couple of my favorite bits of Jack bringing up just after that clip that you played, actually, that David admits that it means nothing if the iwi or the hapu have accepted a settlement. And the example that Jack makes is Kaitahu here in the South Island.
Having 90% control.
90% of control over the entire South Island. Can't do anything about that. So that brings into the point of how many iwi have settled their claims, right? Because there's not that many left. So this won't affect much either. Like, it just seems like a hiding to nowhere. And when anyone points it out, he goes, "Oh yes, but we might be South Africa. We're not South Africa."
So something else he said.
As I watched this is the thought that my wife had, and it is absolutely spot on. David Seymour wants to complete colonization.
Yeah, nice. Well, not
he
nice,
wants to underline it. Nice. Full stop. Job done. Mission accomplished. That's what this reframing is. We want to shut that fucking door. Colonized.
Good call. I'm not saying good, obviously, but it makes sense. This is something else he said, which I tweeted about, which we didn't show then. David Seymour says the version of the treaty that's been interpreted by the courts, etc., is, quote, completely unworkable in a liberal democratic state, end quote. But that's what New Zealand is, and it is working in a liberal. So he says this will never work. This is like him in 1835 going, we could never do this, guys. It's not going to work. Fair enough. You can predict the future, but he's saying this is never going to work for something that's working. It's bizarre.
So earlier in that interview, his whole the thing that he was hanging his fucking hat on, that it was just going to unlock so much potential in this country, is that somebody wanting to do a subdivision or a real estate development, they have to reach out to tangata whenua to do a cultural report, and I guess, you know, see what's happened in the area, make sure that they're not fucking doing it on a battle site or
killing some native animals,
or an urapa or that sort of thing. And I was just like, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. But apparently it's frustrating for developers. And this is why we have a housing problem, because Māori won't let us build subdivisions everywhere. It is that is the most honest thing he has said about this, that it is about property, which absolutely clicks in with everything to do with Atlas. It's everything to do with what they're doing. Whenever there's a colonized indigenous people trying to retain their rights over their land, there is Atlas trying to fuck it up.
Right, speaking of Atlas, I told Jeremy we'd probably get into him between like 2:45 and 10 o'clock, and we haven't even got to Debbie's story yet, so let's keep trucking. Sorry, I know the conversation can be going on, but we've got another guest to come on as well. Kiwi Bird, Chewy's cringe shirt is looking great. Thanks for the super chat. Soul, there we go, done. Soul says, question, what does David Seymour, a pelican, and a kingfisher have in common? Answer, they can all stick their bills up their ass. Up their arsehole. I guess that's what, it's full circle with that joke, actually, isn't it? Kiwi Bird, New Zealand failed when they elected David Seymour. Thank you for your super chat. Peter Syme, sounds like Seymour has a lapse in judgment. Thank you for your super chat. Sorry, I'm just going to rip through these guys. Orange is the new black. I'm wearing it too, Chewy, from James Black. Thank you for your super chat. I'll tell you something else. Someone else has just bought another. Or I'm going to respect you guys even more. I'm not even saying it a joke. I think that orange is fire. Like, I think it's really good. Someone else has just bought another orange on what we were doing on the show. Kookie's just gone late fee. Thank you, sir. Bud Crawford. So hypocritical of the police wearing that black power patch. So disrespectful. Double bloody standards, too damn laws. Mark needs his bloody head red. And Gold says, Rimmer, you're cute. Interpretation. Jack, yeah, but you're incorrect interpretation. Yeah, very good. All right, let's get into Debbie. Debbie Ngarewa-Packer was on the weekend as well. I don't know if they were both live or one was live and one was, I'm not sure. And she had a chance to talk about things. Let me just find my notes here. What's wrong with the Treaty Principles Bill? Pretty obvious question to start off with.
What's wrong with the Treaty Principles Bill?
I said that.
A lot is wrong with it. I think the most significant thing that's wrong with it is that we have a party that is removing te tiriti, which actually protects all of Aotearoa against corporate exploitation. That's the agenda behind this whole dilemma that ACT are pretending exists.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, we've got this whole narrative that tangata whenua are given extra rights. Those extra rights absolutely are afforded because we are Indigenous, but everyone else gets to be consulted in kaupapa. And if you were to actualise what exactly, you know, how we utilise te tiriti today, and I can only reference to, you know, me and seabed mining and Taranaki, NGOs, you know, Greenpeace, Chasm, everyone else who are non-Māori also get consulted.
Yeah, it's a really strong point. I have to say, through this interview, I felt Debbie was a bit shy. Like, Jack nailed her down with, I need an answer, and I think it's fair. We know that's what Jack does, but this is really strong. Like, the Indigenous people of the country, yes, they get consulted, but so does Greenpeace, so does this group, so does this group, so does this group, so does this group. So when David Seymour, as Chewy said last time, says like the RMA and building this and building that, well, if it was, for example, near a wetlands, yeah, DOC would probably be, or Greenpeace would probably also be consulted, not just Māori, but all we ever talk about is just Māori. So we'll keep going.
You know, Greenpeace, Chasm, everyone else who are non-Māori also get consulted and get to engage. We're not given any extra rights to participate, but we are recognised because we are tangata whenua, we have those Indigenous rights.
And of course, half the signatories to the agreement we're talking about. So of course, You don't get to speak into my mortgage agreement with my bank. My bank is half, I am half. I talk to them about my contractual agreement. You don't get to talk to my bank about my contractual agreement. Māori are half the signatories. The Crown is the other half. So yes, there's slightly different rules or different expectations or different outcomes from that. So be it.
And they are the last legal bastion that we have to protect all of Aotearoa from corporate exploitation.
To be totally clear, do Māori have more rights than non-Māori New Zealanders?
Māori have rights.
This is the part where, we call a spade a spade. Debbie fubbed us a little bit. She should have been straighter.
Te whenua, because we're Indigenous.
And so those are more rights, right?
I think those are more also responsibilities and obligations. But if we were to talk about it in a legal reference, and I can, again, only reference to seabed mining, we had NGOs, we had Greenpeace, we had the fishing sector, who are all non-Māori. So again, I think this narrative is deliberately designed as a fair tactic, because we've got the whole, I don't like David's politics, but, he's been led
Of course,
by...
you're going to just stop it. I don't like David, and then stop there, but it's politics.
The Atlas narrative. And we in Aotearoa need to be really clear at what's at play here.
So I just want to be really clear here. You're Māori, I'm not Māori. Do you have more rights than me in New Zealand?
I have more obligations, and I think I also have more rights with those obligations.
So you do have more rights.
Yeah. And I guess that's also really incumbent on me to manaaki and look after Aotearoa, and Te Tiriti is.
It's such this hasn't finished. I'm just thinking this as we're watching it. It hasn't finished, this clip, but it's such an interesting question, and I don't think it's necessarily loaded from Jack, because he does this with everybody. He asks him the question. We respect him for that, as you've just seen with David Seymour. But I wonder if the answer is, if we have any more rights, or the more rights that we have are tied in contractually. They're contractual rights that you don't have because you're not in that contract. You know what I mean? Like if it was explained in a way that's going, any rights or whatever that Māori have that non-Māori don't have are the rights that have been signed on to within the treaty, but nothing more. Within the contract, but nothing more. Just like all the rights you've got with contracts you've signed are yours and your employers, or yours and your banks, or yours and your car loans, whatever, and no one else. And those rights within there are that because of that contract and nothing more. It's not like all of a sudden Māori can drive 100 in a 50 zone. There's not like just arbitrary rights. They're based around the agreement. Does it make sense, Chewie? I'm just thinking this as we're talking. Yeah, absolutely. And like when she was talking about being consulted with other groups, you often see them referred to as stakeholders. So there's consultation with stakeholders, and those stakeholders will be, generally speaking, tangata whenua will be one of the ones that are there among other stakeholders, other landowners, people downstream, environmental groups, that sort of thing. So yeah, she's correct to identify that. Do Māori have more rights than us? If they do, they're keeping it pretty quiet. If they do, they're not benefiting them very much. That's the answer. If they do, what are they getting for it?
It's certainly not a get out of jail free card.
Literally.
Based on our
actually, literally. All right, this has got 30 seconds. Then we'll go on to the last clip of the night.
The only way we protect all of Aotearoa from the Atlas agenda and the corporate exploitation coming at us.
So do you think then, if Te Tiriti guarantees a carve-out for Māori specific rights, do you think that if we are to form modern New Zealand on a constitutional basis around Te Tiriti o Waitangi, that we have different standards of citizenship?
We have different expectations and different rights, absolutely.
There you go. That was when I said Debbie flubbed that. It's no disrespect, but that answer she gave at the end, she could have given 2 minutes earlier. That was just and when you're trying to find the answer, I don't know if you're trying to find the answer. When you're trying to find an answer, it sometimes looks like you're avoiding the question, but got there. Yeah, Chewie, sorry.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to sort of highlight a couple of things here. Kiwi Bird said Debbie is talking to people who are already familiar with the treaty. She really needs to speak to people who are not. And the as you said, the juggling of that question, do we have more rights or not, would not play well with people that are sort of halfway going towards the way that middle New Zealand tends to go.
Yeah.
That lazy, I'm not going to look into it. This is sort of confirming what I already think. And I think that's the battle that Debbie needs to win. She needs to show that this is unfair.
Yeah. All right. This is the last clip. It's about 3 minutes, so we'll get through it as quickly as we can. I'll try my best not to interrupt it. But they're talking about ceding sovereignty, because that's a big part of this conversation. Did Māori cede sovereignty or not? And so let's have a look.
So you say that Māori didn't cede sovereignty. What do you mean by that? If we are to take te tiriti in the most literal form, as you argue, what does that mean for New Zealand?
Well, there are two sovereigns, and neither of them were Atlas or Act. There are two sovereigns that have, enacted.
Did you get that? Two sovereigns, and neither of them are Atlas or Act. It's pretty good. I quite like that.
And signed te tiriti, the sovereign being the Crown and the sovereign being the sovereign of the hapu and the iwi. Those are the parties. Those are actually only where te tiriti should be discussed. The others,
So what does that mean, though, for modern day? So does that mean like we can't have two countries within Aotearoa?
Well, we have, again, two sovereigns. Māori never ceded sovereignty. And again, if the hour, the minute, the second before our natural development was interfered with, what we had is Māori determining their self-determination. And we had those who arrived, who weren't doing well, who had to be actually looked after and looked after by their own sovereign. Now how that, I guess how that manifests into a natural sense isn't a discussion you and I should be having about rangatiratanga. It's a discussion that Aotearoa should be having. Yeah. No, it's not an argument, it's an opportunity. And Mātiki Mai absolutely extends on that opportunity. Right. That's what we should be discussing. That's the contemporary. And I'm excited if we can go down there. Instead, what we have is we're having to defend our existence. We're having to defend our rights and pretend that the last 183 years or so didn't exist. What we've got is a party that David represents that supports having the tiriti settled, and in those settlements, the Crown apologises and acknowledges that it needs to do better in honouring te tiriti. Now we've got a party, again, for a whole agenda to allow corporate exploitation in Aotearoa. This isn't an agenda.
It's a good. Sorry, I don't mean to be the analyst here, but it's a good. The protection of corporate development and overtaking of New Zealand is only the treaty. This is the thing that protects it from the corporate interests, taking us over and heading towards the matrix. It's a really good way of looking at it. And I can hear. I'm trying to think about how other people would see that. It's a good way. It's interesting what you said though, too, because now I'm trying to listen to this conversation as to if I was sitting in a certain seat, how I would be receiving this. And it's interesting if you can put on that other hat, how it really feels. You want to say anything before we go?
No, roll on.
Actually make life easier for us as Aotearoa. It's an agenda to remove the barrier, and the biggest barrier that stops corporate exploitation is te tiriti.
So if we have two separate sovereigns, as you envisage, who decides who belongs to which sovereign?
Well, rangatiratanga is something that's determined by te iwi Māori. And again,
so
that is.
Which would David belong to, for example?
Well, David can determine. I'm not quite sure where David belongs. I think you need to sort of go back and ask the Atlas Collective. But the reality is that tino rangatiratanga and rangatiratanga is not.
We made a clip last week about Christopher Luxon not being particularly subtle. I think we could probably do one with Debbie as well. There's not much subtlety in the Atlas narrative coming out, which is why very shortly, stay with us, whānau, Dr. Jeremy Walker will be joining us to talk about what is that Atlas agenda. We'll keep going. This has got about 60 seconds.
Determined and debated by a party that got less than 8% of New Zealand's votes.
No, I'm asking about your vision for the actualisation of
my vision is that discussion happens outside of Parliament by our rangatira and is determined.
You're a rangatira, so I'm just asking what your vision for that actually is in practical
My vision is that we live in harmony. My vision is that I don't have to keep turning up and defending and having heckling.
Do you know the weird thing about that, Chewy? Most of us fucking do.
Yeah.
And it's like it's the David Seymours of this world who are either trying to convince people that they're not living in harmony, or the ones that follow him and his ilk are the ones who aren't. I feel like I live in harmony. It's like I think, and looking at the hikoi again last week, which was kind of the genesis of part of this conversation, I think that all I saw there was harmony. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. It's exactly true. Like I've said it so many times, the majority of people just want to get on with their lives and not be dicks to people. This is the thing, is the people that are angry about Māori, people that think they're getting one over on everybody, that they've got all of these advantages, that they get millions and billions of dollars out of the government, when it's laughably always, when you ask them how much money they're getting, it's laughably off base with how much they're getting. That sort of thing. They just don't understand. Most people just want to get on with it. Like someone in the chat was earlier commenting that they'd had a conversation with two older ladies in an Ashburton op shop, and they don't like this bill. They don't think it's necessary.
Sheesh, Ashburton, bro. Ashburton's nearly as bad as Timaru, isn't it? I've heard. I'm just saying.
We had a representative from Mid Canterbury in the chat. He didn't last long because he's being really, really racist. So just hammering that stereotype there. But I think overall, there's always going to be those people that are grumbling about one thing. Maybe their life's not going too great, and they want someone to blame. That's a constant thing with racism. My life's not great, and it's because they're taking from me. Māori aren't taking from us. What's good for Māori is good for all of us. Potentially, it is more forests and cleaner rivers and all of these things. We're proud of Māori culture when it suits us. So why don't we just keep moving down this track that we've been slowly plodding down for 50 years of realizing that we have fucked up this treaty, this agreement. We every chance we've had, we've turned our backs on Māori and ignored them and taken from them, and they've taken it on the chin. And then when they push back, we get real shitty about how uppity they're being. It's bullshit, and we need to move past it. David Seymour's way is not how to move past it.
All right, we've got 60 seconds. Let's get into it.
My vision is that tino rangatiratanga and the ability to live with peace and dignity as Indigenous people of Aotearoa.
You said the two sovereigns, right? That's what you said at the start of this interview.
Well, the treaty acknowledges the two sovereigns.
Yes.
And rangatiratanga, again, is something you and I shouldn't be debating. It's actually something that is determined outside.
So which sovereign does David belong to, for example?
Well, I'm not sure who David's sovereign is. I think David...
He whakapapa's Māori, so which does he decide?
Sovereign accountability with the atlases. But the reality... let's get back to
No. I mean, if you answer my question, then I'll move on. So, like, David whakapapa's Māori, right? So would he belong...
It's for David's hapu and David to determine their rangatiratanga.
That's the right answer.
It's not, again, for Debbie to determine the rangatiratanga. Te tiriti is really clear. The articles are really clear. And if David wasn't tinkering, particularly with Article 2, with tino rangatiratanga, it is not determined by kawana. It is not determined by politicians, and it's not determined on a show like you and I are in today. It's determined by te iwi Māori.
Okay.
There you go. And just to wrap this up, that's the end of that clip. Just to let you know, see, this is what our printer does, Julie, to go onto our shirts.
Nice.
That's the size of it. That's the new design. And if you're interested, bhnshop.nz with all those colours that are there. This is one straight off the printer, just now being printed. All right. Do you want to say anything to that, Chewy?
No, I think she finished strong there.
There's another one.
Yeah, I think like there's some in the chat that are really flying the flag for some just really outdated concepts of what Māori are to this country. You know, Māori aren't Indigenous; they colonised the Moriori and ate them all. It's just like, this is what I talk about when David Seymour says we need to have a mature discussion about what te tiriti means in a modern New Zealand. I agree with that statement. Do I think the majority of this country are ready for that discussion? And I mean, have done the fucking work, have listened. Have you done the required readings to be able to turn up to the exam? No.
Yeah.
No, we're not there.
I think I might have just worked it out. Because you just said David Seymour talks about a mature conversation. I think he's got one of the letters wrong. I think what he's meaning is a manure. I think the T needs to be changed with an N. So he wants to talk some shit and he's mispronouncing the word. That's what I think, Les. Anyway, let's get to a couple of super chats super quick. Then we're going to bring Jeremy in. There's a super sticker there which we can't see, whichever you can see. So thank you very much for your super sticker. Cal, people are not equal, but of equal value, no matter where, as what, or as who they are born. Helang. And then there is a, who takers were, Pākehā. Who their takers were. That's
and you can see that all the way through history. Like you look at the New Zealand wars and that sort of thing, and they confiscated lands from the tribes that rebelled, and they confiscated lands from the tribes that didn't rebel, the tribes that supported the crown and fought the rebelling tribes, and they took land from tribes and they gave it to returning soldiers after World War I and World War II, and they didn't give it to returning Māori soldiers. Like it's so obvious. This is the reason why Bastion Point was so important. That was confiscated from Māori for the defense of the country with the promise that they'd give it back, and they almost sold it for land development until Māori stood up and said, no, that's not the agreement we made.
Yeah.
Our history is littered with it. This is why people get really angry about this sort of stuff. And let's be honest, if this had happened in reverse, Pākehā would be having an armed rebellion. We would be burning this fucking place down. We don't know oppression. We think we do. We don't. And I love this thing that people brought up. If you watch Star Wars and you empathize with the rebellion, you got that right. If you watch The Matrix and you emphasized with the plucky human fighters, you got that right. And then when it comes to something like Māori saying, excuse me, there's some historical redress that's needed, and we go, greedy Māori, get back in line.
Gone to the dark side. Point. Yep. We've gone to the dark side on that one. Hey, listen, we have to welcome to the show. We have to. How rude is that? We want to welcome to the show, and we want to apologise to Dr. Jeremy Walker because we kept him waiting far too long. But Dr. Jeremy Walker joins us. Good evening to you, sir.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
nice to see everybody. Nice to be back.
From the University of Technology, Sydney. So what are you now? About 10 past 8 p.m. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. That's right.
And it's like a cold Sydney day at 35 degrees or something.
Yeah, we've got the heat wave, which I think is important. Could be an entree to the way I'd come into this topic because, it's very interesting to see because we spoke a few months back, and it's just to me really interesting to see that we have people in the parliament, that the haka that went around the world. Debbie talking straight up that this is about the Atlas Network and this is not about race, right? And Jack Tame didn't pick that up and didn't follow through and ask for any detail on that. But I think this is really, really important that we have a look at what that means. So thanks for inviting me.
So that's all right. So the very first question is it's words. I'm echoing words that Debbie said when she talked about the Atlas Agenda. What is the Atlas Agenda, and how does it relate to what we're seeing in New Zealand?
Well, I mean, it's a big agenda, right? Because this network has been being built out from the 1970s, really, in a counter-reaction of large corporations and extremely wealthy individuals, particularly in the fossil fuel sector, who really wanted to push back against democracy, against popular movements, like the anti-war movements, like the environmental movement, like in the States, you had the American Indian movement, you had the kind of black liberation, here in Australia, you had land rights. And so there's all of these kind of, there's too much democracy going on. And so they start to figure out they need to change public opinion and push back in this really muscular way. And that's been, the Atlas Network was formed in 1981 to mass produce these free market think tanks with hidden donors, or I'd rather call them investors, because they were building a deliberate infrastructure. They were building something very definite. But the point is to hide from people who is really behind it, and also to hide from people the fact that they're all connected. They have some kind of fundamental connectivity, which is that the directors all meet once a year, or in regional forums, and they're trained by the same people and vetted by the same people. So you've got, David Seymour has his Atlas Network MBA from 2008, which is, I don't know if it's a real qualification or not, but that's kind of like, we've vetted you, we've done all the psychological profiling, you can go out there and we can see you can do media, you can run these campaigns, we've trained you how to do it, because he spent, 2008 to 2013 in the Canadian branch of the Atlas Network. And I think we really should be asking a lot of questions about that. So there's more than 500 of these organizations comprising the total network in 100 countries. Around 200 are in the States, where all the original money came from. That's where the big strength is. About 170 in Latin America, which was built out in the Reagan era to kind of domesticate the popular left-wing movements in Latin America, after the kind of dictatorships that were fostered to repress all of this, popular movements from below in Chile and Argentina, for example, which is where they first tried out their radical programs of privatization and deregulation. Also mass confiscations of indigenous land, of course, in Chile, and handing that out to the generals and the mates and so on. And that's where they first got started. And then, it's kind of branched out to, there's now more than 500 of them. So you've got 2 in New Zealand, and it's really important to look at this in the context, not only of Seymour's background, but also what the New Zealand Initiative and the Taxpayers Union are. Who are they? What are they doing? And how are they participating in this whole debate? Now, since I was last speaking to you, we've seen their program actually emerge, and we've seen, attempts to claims that we need to overturn seabed and seashore rights. So what I would say, and we need to have an LNG terminal now. We're going to set fast track legislation to smash through all of these mining projects. You've got offshore wind being, cancelled so they can, because of seabed claims that they're now advancing. You've got overturning the previous government's ban on, oil and gas exploration, because we're in this absolutely disastrous climate emergency. And so the real thing here is, like, what Seymour is doing is exactly the same thing that they did in Australia. And to me, it's really galling to see all those comments that he makes about, Australia divides people by race. Like, we tried to get there was a referendum, long overdue, just for recognition, right?
Is it the Voice?
That Aboriginal people exist and have existed. Yeah, the Voice referendum. And that would have given people a voice to the Parliament, but not seats in the Parliament, which is what Māori have already. And it wouldn't have set up any additional things. It was a very, 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 very modest proposal compared to what, what you have, and what is admirable and what is admired about the settlement, the plurinational, pluri-sovereign settlement of the Constitution. So they're coming at the Constitution not because of race and equality. This is the story they want to tell you. And this is exactly the slogan they used here over and over again. It will divide us by race, divide us by race, divide us by race. No one wants to know about race.
Hey, just a question, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Can we, if you can, contextualize it to what you're seeing, like you're doing now, seeing in New Zealand, and seeing what benefits the Atlas Network by a group, I'll say allegedly funding things like what David Seymour is doing, to then it feels like kind of put the knee on the neck of Māori and New Zealand, or Indigenous people. What benefit do they see from it, and why would they be doing that in New Zealand?
Well, they'll be doing it for exactly the same reasons that, if you look at let's look at where David Seymour was trained, right? He was trained, he went over and did this course in 2008 with Brad Lipps, the CEO, probably over at George Mason University. And, that is well known for being funded by the Koch brothers' oil refining billions, right? Now, the mainstay of the Koch brothers' fortune, they ploughed in, since the early 70s, into building up this network and refining their tactics and building all this infrastructure, and training people and pumping out publications and just flooding every corner of it, and just systematically knocking out the things that the ordinary people have to resist being dominated by billionaires and giant corporations. So they're kind of, so if you look at where he comes from, it's a frontier centre in Canada. Now, they have, I put a few links in the chat. We've been, I've been looking at their climate denial stuff. They've published like thousands over the last 20 years, thousands of things saying that climate change isn't real, or that climate policy will wreck the economy, or that solar panels don't work at nighttime, all of this stuff. Now, who would be literally, they're in the thousands. One of the most productive climate policy and anti-climate science of all of the 500 Atlas think tanks. Not all of them do it. About half of them do climate denial and obstruction. But and then they also have this whole thing I just put out there, put to you in the chat there about how the anarcho-indigenous ideology of extreme protesters, like that is indigenous people wanting to block new oil pipelines on their land, is it's terrorism. They're going to ruin the state, and these hippies that are trying to arguing that we shouldn't have more coal and gas in an absolute disaster where we're already off the cliff, that they should all be locked up and they should be treated as terrorists. So they've got this whole, it's a very specifically trying to take away the rights of Indigenous people in Canada, and then denying their historical legacy and their land rights, right? So the same thing. That's basically what it's really about. The Constitution.
So let's have a look. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of things. So specifically in New Zealand, 25th of October this year. So what's that? A month ago. Wind power firm departs amid fast track controversy over seabed mining. So literally getting rid of what you're talking about, and literally opening up, stuff within the ocean, stuff within the seas. Chewy, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, this is the consistent thing, and I think why Atlas has targeted Indigenous people, because they're often the core environmental protest group, right? They don't want their land wrecked by oil pipelines or strip mines and all of that sort of thing. So I think when it comes to a document like Te Tiriti guaranteeing Māori a say at what happens to their lands and their fisheries, that is an existential threat for a group like Atlas, and especially for the supporters of that group, because that is something that can give personhood to a river. Then what else can they do? Are we going to have covenants over the West Coast for strip mining and that sort of thing? So this seems to be a thing. Like Atlas has had a linchpin in the New Zealand initiative. They were involved right from day dot. So New Zealand has a really important part in this group. They know the treaty, they know the movements here, and they have exported that knowledge to other colonized countries for the benefit of mining groups, especially.
Jeremy?
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, if you look at so that's what Seymour was doing when he was learning how to be political, how to go out in front of the cameras, how to say the same thing over and over again to make which is what they do here. Divide by race, divide by race, divide. Now, what that does is put into your head the idea that this is about race and it's about division. Now, what is the opposite of that? Unite by race? Like, are we all going to be one white nation again? Like, what? But that's what they're doing. What is the opposite of divide? What do they want? They want us to be united by race, or unite the white race against the brown race that's got too many rights. Like, that's what I think really is the subtext there, And the thing is that the Constitution, we often they want to talk about equality of individual rights in the Constitution, but fundamentally what constitutions do, even if they don't say it so explicitly, but the Article 2 of the Waitangi Treaty does say this, it demarcates land. Who has rights to land, who doesn't, what can happen on what land. And that is what the Voice was all about here, right? It was all about that. The think tanks here that set up the New Zealand Atlas in the 80s, so the No campaign came out of those think tanks, which is the Centre for Independent Studies. Alan Gibbs was on the board of that in the mid '80s when they set it up, the Atlas in New Zealand, and the guy who instigated it, one of the most important instigators, was a guy called John Bonathan, who founded the giant gas corporation Santos, which has all kinds of ongoing court battles with First Nations people in Australia. They really don't want to have a voice in Parliament, bringing that up in Parliament and then bringing it up in the press. So that, and it was even said so. Anthony Mundine, who was one of the faces, Indigenous man who has spent 10 years or more working within the Australian branch of the Atlas for them, he literally said it on the website. You can still see it now on the Centre for Independent Studies website. He said the problem with the voice of Parliament will be that you'll have all these people saying stuff which will slow down, not stop, slow down the approval of giant coal and gas projects. He literally said what it was about. And but then everyone was like, oh, it's about race, and are we equal or are we not? We'll wreck the constitution. But that's really fundamentally what's at stake here, because New Zealand is seen internationally as a real beacon of how you can actually have a plurinational, post-colonial, pluri-sovereign, bilingual, settlement, a constitutional settlement. So they're going after your constitution. Just in the same way that in the States, you've seen now the Federalist Society, which is yet another affiliate of the Atlas Network, right? The Federalist Society was set up precisely to completely reinterpret the ordinary understanding of justice, right? So these billionaires would fund these training programs for judges where they'll be feted in fancy hotels, and they'll say, no, you got to think about the economic interpretation of law. It's about property rights and, the free market and stuff. And now you've got a situation where the Supreme Court in the States is just saying, oh, the president is outside the law. The president can do what he wants, can't commit a crime. That's the Federalist Society. All those nominees that have stacked it are coming from that tradition as well. So it's really important. They want to take away the ability of ordinary people to challenge giant fossil fuel industries right at the time when we need to shut them down. And I think that's what this is really about.
Hey, two last questions. I'm just going to mute you while I'm talking, just because people are saying they're getting an echo, so that will stop it. I'll unmute you when I finish asking my questions. The first question is, what's in it for David Seymour? And the second question is, what can we, not like me and Chewie, but we the people, do about this incursion by Atlas into our communities? And you're back on now.
Well, I really don't know what's in it for Seymour. I really fail to understand what motivates these people. I mean,
money? Is it just that? Is it no more? Is it just money?
Oh no, it's power. It's the feeling of having the most dangerous, richest, most powerful people in the world backing you up, right? These people are used to winning. They nearly always win. And in fact, what's really important, and I would really stress this to everyone in Aotearoa, is that New Zealand is the first place in the world where people are saying the Atlas Network is doing this to us. That's never happened before. It's hardly even happened that people have looked back and said, "Oh, the Atlas Network did that," because here we had a carbon tax policy and renewable energy policy under a Labor government, 2009 to 2013, and the Murdoch press ran this massive campaign about the carbon tax was going to ruin everything, and that was run through the Institute of Public Affairs. They put out 1,000, hundreds and hundreds of media things, and it was all amplified. And then they rolled the government, and then the next government came in and abolished that, right? So it was driven, and the Atlas website still says, "Oh, we nominated for a prize for this," And if you can go to the Atlas website as well, they wanted to nominate for a prize another Canadian one called MacDonald Laurier, because they had this huge campaign against ratification of the UN UNDRIP, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, precisely because it might give First Nations people more leverage to stop unwanted oil and gas projects. That's why they did it. And so what I would say to New Zealanders is that you want to have a look at, you really want to focus on what NZI and Taxpayers Union are doing, right? So if I look at, you have in New Zealand Initiative, you have the chairman of the board, last time I looked, was a guy called Roger Partridge, who runs the Bell Gully law firm. Now they are on the petroleum industry lobby, the Energy Aotearoa. And if you have a look at who else is on there, it's there's the Australian one, the Australian APIA, which is where you'll find the really big ones like Shell, BP, Chevron, Conoco, all the giant American oil companies, and that's what it's about, right? You look at the other people on the board. Now they don't tell you who pays for them. You can kind of guess by their board crossovers. So you've got on the NZI, you've got the Bell Gully law firm, which designed the carbon market, the trading market that you have, but it had no cap. So you could trade these certificates, but there was no limit, right? So it didn't actually affect the fossil fuel industry at all. So that's why they like it. You've got consultancies like Charles River Associates, which are well known in my academic area for every time there's an election, they'll put out an independent economics report saying, the climate policy of the progressive or the centre left party will destroy the economy and there'll be mass unemployment. They put out these hit pieces before elections. You've got banks, ANZ, Deutsche Bank. These are all huge fossil investors, Origin Energy. And then I look at what's happening.
Can I just bring us back?
Yeah,
sorry. Just the last thing is, what can we do?
Well, I guess what you can do is, I think exactly what Te Pāti Māori, what Debbie said on that interview, is actually look at who is benefiting from this. It's not about race and equality at all. The whole point of that slogan is to get us talking about race and whether we're equal or not. No, it's about land rights and who gets to decide whether or not giant foreign corporations can destroy your land or not. That's fundamentally what it's about. So I will be looking very carefully at what the NZI is doing and who are those people and what are they doing. I'll be looking at the cases around Mike Smith's case that's coming up in the court. What is Seymour saying about that? What is the Act saying about it? What is our best mate Jordan? So I would be really, really looking at that. I would be encouraging everybody in New Zealand to be looking at precisely those links to.
All right. Before we wrap up, Chewy, is there anything else you want to get in before we say goodbye to Jeremy?
I think it's important to realise that this guy is not the mastermind. He is just the messenger.
That's correct. Yeah. That's right.
So
he's there to do a job for someone else, but you don't know who those. We don't know who that is. Well, we can, if you look at follow the atlas, you'll find out who it is. But like Debbie Gibbs, for example, you can see her on the Atlas webpage talking about. She's the chair of the board, so she's sitting on top of these people who don't, not through the Atlas own accounts, but through backdoor deals. They're like handling millions and millions and millions of dollars for this kind of disinformation, state capture, to knock down laws they don't like, to swing elections, to smear people. So and one of the things on the site she talks about, she met the legendary George Pearson. He's the guy who was running the Koch brothers' massive oil-derived political slush fund, which has built the Atlas. It's one of the major funds of many very large billionaire funds, but probably the major one that's built the Atlas over time. So there's a direct line there to some of the richest private billionaires in the US that have brought about the possibility of the Trump phenomenon in the US. And that's
really
what we should be careful about.
And I guess what we can do, Jeremy, is keep talking about it. Hey, look, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We appreciate you giving us some time.
I'm really proud of everybody over there. And I watched the Hikoe, I saw Hannah's haka. It's just like so good to see.
Good,
keep it up. Yeah. Keep it up. Right. Stick together, back each other up, and keep on. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Jeremy Walker, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, there we go. So, gosh, there's so much information that we need to figure out and find out from. Anything you want to say just to wrap that all up, Chewy? Anything?
I forgot to start the comment, but I'm just going to paraphrase. Sometimes it can be difficult when we spent so long pushing back against conspiracy theories, right? These shadowy global organizations, World Economic Forum, whatever, and then talk about something like Atlas. You can find these documents, you can find these pictures, and when I started reading about Atlas and going back and seeing that some of its major roots are with New Zealanders, the Gibbs family, and all of that sort of thing. And just, oh God. And just seeing that these people all started this stuff in the late 80s when people were making mad money, but that was also the start of the environmental movements. You saw Indigenous rights coming more to the forefront in New Zealand around that time as well. You saw an utter dismantling of the New Zealand system to build neoliberalism, and those same people were involved in that as well. It's the links are so clear and so obvious, and every time I see something from the Taxpayers Union, I'm reminded of how much these guys have got their fucking thumb on the scale. They'll talk about democracy, they'll talk about the marketplace of ideas, but they're trying to own all the storefronts. They're trying to shape the discussion that the rest of us are having.
Yeah.
It's not fair. It is money. Money. And if you've just got to make one choice when it comes to talking about the principles of the treaty and that sort of thing, that intersection between who you're going to stand with international mining giants or the indigenous people of New Zealand trying to protect rivers and trying to keep these guys from strip mining conservation estates and that sort of thing. Make your choice. This is literally the old guard trying to maintain their stack of money and trying to fool us into thinking that there is no way that we can transition into a glorious future. That the only way to keep doing things is to do things the way that we always have, because that's working out all right. Don't you have a great big TV, and aren't you thankful for that? We are crashing through some really serious red lines in terms of climate change, because these guys don't want to change. They don't see the value in transitioning to new energy development or anything like that, because they're so heavily invested in the old ways.
Yeah.
So this comes to the crux of what I have been saying lately. What is good for Māori is good for all of us. That's the end game, to keep these fuckers out. David Seymour is the herald, and I think they have chosen poorly, because I wouldn't follow that man out of a burning building.
I think you saw that tonight as well with Jack Tame. Like, it's like 5 parts brilliant, 5 parts terrible, that Jack Tame pushed back on so many things. And maybe when he was on, I think he was on Te Ao with Moana, or Mihi Narangi Forbes did a bit with him. But really, other than those 2 or 3 things, have we heard anyone else in the media push back in that kind of way? So it was a great watch and it was a great interview. But it feels like to me, when I said I think he was weak in that interview, Seymour, it feels to me that because it's like he'd never thought he'd have to answer these questions. I think it was Mihi Narangi Forbes who asked about Atlas and he went, here we go. Remember that interview? It might have been Moana. I'm not sure which one, but it just ends up being someone who has the arrogance to go, no one's going to question me. That's kind of how, or who's not smart enough to know that people are going to question him. That's how it kind of comes across.
So I have a couple of thoughts on this. First thought is he's a man in an echo chamber.
Yep.
He doesn't, as much as he talks about debate, he doesn't engage with debate. He will go on places like the platform. He'll make some comments on Facebook, that sort of thing. But he isn't thrown into something like Jack Tame is a phenomenal interviewer. As much as we sometimes criticize him, if there's one interviewer in New Zealand that you have to go into correct with your shit squared away, it's a Jack Tame interview. That's why Luxon doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And I think Gray here in the chat pointed out David's tell is that he blinks a lot, and that's because he is a lizard man, and that's how they get oxygen. It's actually through the eyes and not through the mouth. So watch for that.
Speaking of, thank you for the super chat, Worming. While Seymour is pushing his bill, New Zealand Initiative calls to reign in the Supreme Court. Reference a looming constitutional. Yeah, I saw that. It was on their front page. Yeah, hang on.
Yes, clear and present danger. The New Zealand Supreme Court.
Here we go. A looming constitutional crisis. Who started that crisis? Yeah, this is the other thing, and we've been talking about this a lot. You know, people are talking about like the Seymours of this world are talking about all the division. It's like, well, if there is, it's either been it's because of you, or at the very least you've added jet fuel to it by doing these things. It's like we've told you this for a long time, whānau. You know what the right does in general is they'll sit in opposition and they'll go, oh, government's too big, government's broken, government can't work, private sector does it better, government's terrible at it, and then they get elected, and then what they do, think about all the cuts, think about the lack of spending, think of the tax breaks, think of the landlords, is they actively break government. So they become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then they step back and point and they go, see, we told you government didn't work, but we've got these guys back here who have got an LTD at the end of their business name, limited liability company, and they're going to come and fix the problem for you. So they are a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's why when you hear the stories about, you know, the conservative part of politics being good for the economy, there was a letter dropped last week by 15 economists saying, start spending. the Treasury saying, stop, that famous left-wing mouthpiece, the Treasury, saying, stop all the cuts, because they've sold the narrative, because they want to watch the pennies, so they say, and they've sold the narrative that they're good with politics. When were all the last surpluses? Not on the national, it's fucking Cullen Fund, mate.
Oh,
that was when all the surpluses were. What about old Auntie Jacinda, who got us through a crisis, keeping 20,000 New Zealanders alive, as the record said, and better than most. Yeah, there was a hard landing, but we got through it better than most countries. And so I'm over this. They're better, the right's better at the economy, when they're clearly not, because what you should be doing in a recession type economy is spending, and they're cutting, which is going to worsen the economy, and it's going to make all our tradies and nurses and police leave these shores. And then when the economy is better, there's going to be no one here to fix it up. So it's frustrating, Chewy.
So you talk about surplus and that sort of thing. Where is it? Sorry, I just had to scramble to find it. So this is from when? 21st of November. Associate Finance Minister Chris Bishop is tempering expectations around the government's ability to return its books to surplus by 2027-28. And this is a direct quote. We are not going to be a slave to a surplus, he told the Herald when asked to comment on the Treasury warning about the economy. So there you go. Remember, they campaigned on being the safe financial set of hands. They're the party of business, party of numbers. They're the ones that are going to get all of this excess spending under control. And we have seen a series of public service cuts like we have never seen before. These guys threw a fucking boat anchor into the machinery of this country to cut costs. And now they're saying there might not be a benefit to this. Sorry.
Just remember as well, yeah, and I know you can't compare it to a household budget, but if you had a household budget and you wanted to save for something, right? So you wanted to save, that's called a surplus. So you've got leftover at the end of the day. You decide to stop spending in various areas to save that money, right? So you need to have more money left over after you pay your bills. This government saying we're not going to have more money left over, right, after we pay all our bills, as they give away $17 billion in tax cuts and landlord reimbursements. So they've taken $17 billion out of their pile of money, and now they don't have extra money to put into a surplus. Can anyone see what we're saying here? They've taken away a huge lump of their consolidated fund, and they've gone, phew. And now they're saying we're not going to get back into surplus, which is by definition requires the government to have more money than they spend as they give away money in tax breaks and landlord reimbursements.
Yep. Like we have said on the show before, the government's job is to spend money when times are tough to stimulate the economy. They take their foot off the gas when times are good. We expect them to do that. This is the time that they should be doing big projects, big 100%. State-owned solar or wind farms.
Yep.
The double tracking and electrification of our entire rail network.
Tunnels under Wellington. Oh, no, we'll leave that one. We'll leave that one. Not that one.
Those sort of projects. You can see that historically. The countries that did well out of the Depression did great, big social benefit programs, whether it's building houses or highways or autobahns. Sorry, Mustache Man got that one right, unfortunately. Those things help those countries claw themselves out of a depression, also into a global war. But we'll brush over that. That was also very, very good for the economy for a select group of people around the world. So yeah, those are the things. We built dams, we built power stations and refineries, almost bankrupted the country, but they provided infrastructure that we still use to this day, near 50 years later. So maybe that was actually a good decision. But that pushing the country into near bankruptcy to do it set the stage for the same fucking people we're talking about that set up Atlas to sell off everything that taxpayers built and owned.
Yeah.
Everything is fucking linked. Everything is together. And I feel now like Charlie Day pointing at the pegboard with the red strings everywhere. So there is a danger in that.
All right. I tell you what, team, we're going to wrap up there. We're going to do a few chats and stuff. I want to say a huge thanks to all of our patrons, lovely patrons who are with us. If you enjoy the show, if you like what we do, and you'd, pardon me, like to get behind us, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. So we had a meetup in the weekend. Lovely people had a meetup, which that was a shot there, but I said I wouldn't do it online, so I'm not going to just pause on that. And of course, patrons got early access to the merch shop, which is currently up and running. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the people who have got themselves the orange foo-foo hoodie. There are a few actually during the show. Remember, this is a 5-day only sale. End of Friday night's show with the Friday night crew. We're going to be taking these all offline because I want you to be able to get your stuff before Christmas. As I said, this is literally the press that goes on. There it is. That's the press. So I could even model it for you on this. No, wasn't that? Look good. Does it look good? Nice. Feels like I'm wearing some kind of weird bra. And BHN merch there, Buffer gear there, Nicky No Boats there in those colours from last week, and also Chewy blowing his stack because he's a ginger and that's what they do.
Can't
BHN
regulate
shop.
my emotions.
Yeah. And thank you again, like I'm just saying, for the patrons. Thank you so much. It's amazing that you guys come on board and help us out, especially coming up to these 2 months because we finish up, towards Christmas and we start up again sort of mid-January. So there's a period of time that we don't have the same sort of YouTube income and that sort of stuff. So that's what carries us and pays our bills through. So we really appreciate it. Some chats. Sorry. Yes, Chewy. No.
Sorry, I was just going to say, chat has corrected me that I have repeated an oft-repeated myth about Hitler doing the Autobahn. No, his economic policies was an absolute joke. Everything we've done before.
Brian says the treaty is the roadblock for Atlas. Thank you for your super chat. Hohen Angel, Atlas sounds so fake, like a literal James Bond villain organization, except it's not secret and it's real. Actual Saturday morning cartoon villains. Free Soul, he lied and denied Atlas while talking to Mihi Falls. Yeah, it was Mihi Narangi Falls. Although we've seen all the footage, there's no lie there. The Atlas Network wants oligarchy, and that's it for the super chats. You've started a few more in there, Chewy. Is there any that you really want to get out there as well?
Yep, Barb Smart, get out and write that submission against Seymour's bill. You've got time because we've got a ridiculous 6-month submissions process. But take your time, write a good submission. Be clear, be concise, be rational, and if you feel confident enough, tick that box to make an oral submission. Okay, so that's where you zoom in and you actually hit your points to the submissions committee.
Should we do a joint one? We do one together. Like we'll do like a theatre sports word at a time, something like that. Should we do that?
Seymour, you fuck. So that's why I can't do that. I think that's the important one I want to hit. Work on your submissions. That's your homework. That's your assignment.
All right, team. It's been a very busy show, so we will have to love you and leave you. Mind you, it's getting up towards 11 o'clock, Joey. Local time live. So we're going to head off now. Thanks for being with us tonight, team. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m.
Settle a debate, whether it be thoughtful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that
All right, guys. Yes, if you didn't notice, new credits tonight, so we can finally fit everyone in the pages. This is another thing the patrons get. If you're not aware, they become a part of our scrolling credits at the end. So thank you to all of you guys for being a part of it. That's it for me, Chewy. Anything you want? Anything you want to throw out there?
No, that's it. I'm done.
All right. Well, I think we've got to come back at the end of this. Nala's not in the studio tonight, but I think at the end of this, rather than Nala, I think we need to have a stand-up Chewy full screen showing that t-shirt one more time. BigAChop.nz. So we'll be back to you in a couple of minutes, and we'll get the full flash by Chewy as we go. See you tomorrow from 9 team. Hooroo! Look at those nipples. Oh, hey, oh, look at those. Look at those nipples.